Odd days are ahead of even days now. So the last grade that you actually have to do in AP Bio is due on the 11th, your last installment of the ultimate review. And up at the top, it tells you like how much you need to write, but it's 4 pages. And by 4 pages, it also says this at the top, front, back of a paper is the 4 pages. So some of you guys have already done it. You might have turned in 8 pages last time. And so if you go and you look on Aries in the ultimate review dose 2 column, it'll already have your grade in there. If you asked for formative grades, then it'll say NA, and I gave you formative grades. If it's blank, then you haven't turned it in yet, or I haven't graded it yet. If you turned it in like, I think I saw 1 or 2 come in like last night. So there's 1 or 2 in Canvas that I haven't looked at yet. So that's due on the 11th. If you're taking an AP exam or whatever, then just get it to me, like that night by the 11th is fine. My main goal is that you do it before the AP exam for obvious reasons. So I don't actually care if you turn it in at noon on the 11th or at like 5 p.m. on the 11th. I'm just wanting you to do it before the real AP exam. And then our AP exam is Friday, so a week from today. And we have the 8 a.m. test, which means that you have to get here more like 7:30-ish because they start reading, or they say anyway, that they're going to start reading the all the stuff at 8. And the reason it matters is because if we can get you started on time, then students that leave the AP Bio test and then afterwards have to take the afternoon test, they get like, say, an hour in between to go to lunch and like not think about something hard for a while. But if we get started late, then all of a sudden there are students where it's like, all right, you got 20 minutes, now come back for your afternoon test. And I haven't looked to see what's after us, but usually the afternoon tests are the less common ones. Almost. They had to move stats. May 13th is, I guess, a religious holiday. And so they're like, oh, whoops. And so they moved all the May 13th ones to Monday. So for us, we don't offer Chinese, and any students that are taking the Chinese one, they're not sweating it. They're likely fluent in Chinese, and that's why they're taking it. Otherwise, you wouldn't just be like, I think I'll take the AP Chinese test. It's like, have you ever taken the class? No, it doesn't exist. But I figured take a shot at it. So those kids are probably fine, but environmental. So if you're in environmental, after you take our test in the morning, you've got environmental in the afternoon. So anyway, make sure that you're here. Ours is in the gym, um, which that's where your big tests have been if you've taken some. Some of the smaller tests are in like the lecture hall and stuff like that. So anyway, be down there by the gym, kind of like where you come in from the senior parking lot, and be in there around 7:30, and we'll check you in. I plan on being there as long as I'm like not sick or something, so I can identify you. So as long as I'm there or somebody else is there that knows you, you don't need a photo ID. But just in case I'm sick and you walk up and you're like, hey, I'm Alan Cotton, I'm here to take the test. And they're like, prove you're Alan Cotton. I'll be like, well, so I need a photo ID. Huh? So that's what I heard was this year that nobody was really asking. I was like, well, but was your teacher there? And they're like, no, nobody was checking that. It's like, okay, that's a pretty good racket. I mean, as Travis Shields, I'd be making some cash. I'd just be going like, hey, $500, I'll take your AP English test for you. Um, so anyway, you want to bring pencils, blue or black pens for the essay, a calculator. If you don't bring a calculator, you get one of mine, one of these little guys. But if you bring a graphing calculator, then as you're doing math, you can see 2 or 3 or 4 lines of math at a time. So that's kind of the advantage. This doesn't have any buttons that help you any more than these buttons. It's just mainly, I can only view 1 line of math at a time on this one. And other than that, I will bring donuts. So my donut budget is a little bit tight after that hailstorm. My donut budget has become my windshield budget. Um, so I'll probably bring about 6 dozen or 7 dozens. I think there's like 90 something students taking the AP Bio test. So if you're one of the first 60 or 70, you get a donut. And if not, then you miss out. So door prizes, throw your name in the hat for a drawing. A used expo pen. Um, So yeah, so if you show up earlier, you get donuts. And does anybody know that place used to be called Half Price Donuts, and it used to have half price donuts. Um, but they really were. And now they're under new management. And I went in there and visited, and the difference in management is now it's full price donuts. So does anybody know of a place that happens to have cheap ones? Because it used to be that place right over there by Little Caesars. They were like $5 a dozen. Everywhere else was like $9 a dozen. Okay, I guess I'll go to full price donuts then and get the donuts there. Oh, that's not the actual name. It's half price donut? No, that's just what I call it now. That's the scariest name ever. What's the name of yours? We charge you the full amount. Um, okay, and the other last announcement that I've got is Tuesday after school is our last after school review, and it's basically just whatever questions you want to bring. I'm out of like planned topics, so if there's something you want, you can let me know ahead of time, or you could just ask me on the spot. If you let me know ahead of time, if you wanted like questions or something like, hey, could you find some free response on this topic? Give me a heads up on that. If you just want to like randomly out of nowhere ask me like, hey, could you talk about cellular respiration? I can do that like in the moment. But if you're like, hey, have you got any ecology free response? Well, I mean, give me a minute, I can find some. So, but otherwise, it'll just be kind of like show up and ask questions. It can be something general, like could you summarize cellular respiration? Or it could be some small, really specific, like, hey, what's the difference between a competitive and a non-competitive inhibitor again? That kind of thing. So that'll be next Tuesday. And I haven't really looked to see what tests are after that, so I don't know if attendance will be good or not. Usually, this week's Tuesday and next week's Tuesday are not attended very well because people are worried about like Wednesday's test. I think that's it for announcements. We got nothing new in the chat. You can look this up online if you want it, and I've said it a few times. But our test, the multiple choice section, you get 90 minutes and you get 60 questions. And I've been timing you all year long, kind of close to AP pace. And then our mock exams were at AP pace. So it should feel like the same speed as our 2 mock exams. And then you get 6 free response, 90 minutes. The first 2 are long ones. They're 8 to 10 points each. And then the last 4 are all 4-point questions. So questions 1 and 2 are worth essentially the same amount as questions 3, 4, 5, and 6. Again, depending on how many points question 1 and 2 are. It's very weird. They haven't even told us like they're 8 to 10 points each, but between the two, they'll be like 18 points. They haven't even said that. So it might be like 2 10-point questions or 2 8-point questions. I don't know, because this is different. I think that's it for announcement type stuff. Um, testing strategy. Now that you've taken a couple of mock exams, you should know like, are you going to finish on time or not? So obviously you bubbled in, like you didn't leave blank bubbles, hopefully, on your mock exams. But it might be that you're like, yeah, out of 60 questions, I legitimately finished 55, and I had like a minute and a half left. So I just kind of like ABCD'd the last 5. So if you're going to be short like 5 questions or so, they usually have those 4 or 5 question sets where they'll like give you a bunch of information and then ask you like 4 or 5 questions about it. Remember the grapes that you guys like so much? They give you all the grape data, and then they ask you like 4 or 5 questions about the grape experiments. Not the great experiments, the grape experiments. And so that's a question set. Well, if I know that I'm going to be short 4 or 5 questions, then that just gives me the liberty when I'm cruising along and I get to a 4 or 5 question set and it looks a little bit shorter. All right, I'll do that one. Then when I get to one that's just like out of control, you're like, first page, they still haven't asked me anything. Second page, oh my gosh, the second page is full of graphs. They still haven't asked me anything. Third page, now they're asking me stuff. Well, ease your mind. You're going to be short 4 or 5, so skip it. Come back and fill something in, but just know like that's what you want to do. If I'm going to be short 4 or 5 questions, that means I'm going to skip a question set. I'll come back to it at the end if I have time. Before your time is up, when there's 5 minutes left, they should remind you that you have 5 minutes left. Make sure you kind of keep track so that when you have a minute left, you can go back and like bubble in anything that you skipped over. So don't forget to do that. Any questions before we kind of get going with the regular class today? Cool. Hang in there. You have one more week, and most of your AP teachers traditionally take it very, very easy on you after you take their AP test. So we always take it easy on you during these 2 weeks because we're trying to respect the other classes that still have stuff going. But they generally just take it easy on you afterwards. So, I think we're doing a research paper in English after the AP test. Are you serious? We're for my class. We're just actually writing college essays. So that's something useful where you're like, all right, this is something that I need to do anyway. So now I'm just doing it during class, and maybe my teacher can help. So that makes sense. Me, we don't. We watch some random there's some TED Talk videos that I think are cool, so I'll show you those. But we just I don't even pretend to apply any pressure at all. So there's still some science stuff, and then there's also plenty of yearbook signing and things like that, playing cards, whatever. Um, Still got calculus left. I thought calculus happened already. Oh, which ones happened? AB or BC? Oh, I swore somebody just told me that they took calculus. Calculus was on Tuesday. Yeah, AB is Calc 1 in college. BC is 1 and 2. Here we call it AB and BC, but it's BC calculus. Same left in calculus. Oh, yeah, like your class test. Okay. I thought you meant the AP test. I was like, dude, I think you missed it. Yeah, so you mean in calculus, you still have a test. Our semester exam, yeah, sorry about that, David. I misunderstood. um, so our semester exam, if you want to be exempt, you can be exempt. I don't care about the 85 thing. So if you've got a 72 in the class and you're like, I'm done, me too. If you want to take it, the easiest way for me to write one is to just write 4 free response. So that's what I'll do, as opposed to coming up with 60 multiple choice or something. So it'll be 4 free response. It'll cover second semester stuff. And if you're interested in taking it, then let me know, or actually I'll put the details, once we're done with the AP bio test, I'll put the details as to what the topics are and stuff. So typically I have one student every 2 years that takes it, something like that. Somebody that's got a 89 or a 79 and they want to see if they can bump it up a bit. But anybody can be exempt. The official policy is 85, but what you gonna do? Yeah, so it is confirmed. Earlier this week, they sent out the rules, and if you have an 85 or better for the semester, not a 9 weeks, for the semester in a class, then you can be exempt. There's a few exceptions, like if you're in a dual credit TCC or something like that, then you obey TCC rules. If you have some sort of project or something, but 90% of classes, if you got an 85 or better, you're good to go. One quick little bit of advice on that. If you're really, really close, nobody checks us, they just trust us. So if a teacher wants to exempt you and you've got an 84 or an 83, they can. If I want to exempt you and you've got a 75, I can. So if you're really, really close and you want to be like, hey, I've got an 84, is there anything I can do? Might as well throw it out there and see if a teacher will let you. For me, you're good to go though. Okay, so now let's see something new. It's something new, but it is also something a little bit sad. That part's not sad. You're like, that's a happy family walking along together. So it doesn't start out as sad. It's later on when we do some experiments on mice that you're going to feel bad for the mice. Okay, so we've got this thing called BMI. Have you guys heard of your body mass index before? So the BMI chart was sort of created in what did you say? Are you underweight? Okay. Um, I was 140 up until last year. Wait, you're 6'4" and you weigh how much? You're healthy, right? Healthy weight. That is underweight. Yeah. Yeah, you're actually dead center ideal weight. Um, so the VMI chart was invented in about 1940 something. And the people that made it didn't think it was the be all end all thing. Some people are like, there's some problems with this chart. And it's like, yeah, it'd be like if all we looked at to determine whether or not you went to college was like your senior year grades. It's like, this is faulty. Well, yeah. So the BMI just takes your body weight and your height and divides them, and then we just sort of like put it into categories. So even if you're in person, you can't see these numbers very well because the colors make it very difficult to read. But they just sort of have a range. Green is healthy, turquoise is underweight, orange is overweight, and red is obese. Purple up here is extremely obese. So the reason that we'll talk about this is not for like body shaming about 15 pounds or of extra body fat or something like that. It's more like when you're obese, then there's like a health concern. So this isn't about like, I don't like the way that I look in the mirror or something like that. This is more like, I don't want you to die from a heart attack type of talk if you're a doctor talking to a patient. Okay, so they got this BMI chart, and you have to kind of put it into perspective because, like, let's say I was an NFL running back. Current running backs are usually shorter. So they're like 5'9", but they weigh like 205, 210. So if I was an NFL running back, I'd be classified as obese. But am I probably pretty fit? Yeah, most of those dudes still have like six-pack abs. So, but they'd be classified as obese. Now, if they walk into a doctor's office, a doctor is intelligent, like they went to medical school. They aren't going to be like, you're obese, you need to lose weight. They're going to be like, you look very fit. Your BMI would say that you're obese, but I have eyeballs, so I know that you're actually ridiculously strong. So why does this matter? Insurance companies determine whether or not to pay for your surgeries based off of BMI sometimes. So I might be a candidate for gastric bypass. And that's where they kind of like shrink your stomach. They can do various lap bands. They can basically, if I'm overweight, and one of the ways that we can control it is one of the ways that hunger happens is if my stomach is a certain size, when it's like 60% full, I feel full. Well, if my stomach is this big, then I can hold like a lot of food before it's 60% full. But if my stomach is only this big, then now like half of a hamburger and I feel full. So if we could go in and somehow adjust, cut parts of my stomach, sew things together to make my stomach smaller, then I would feel full faster and maybe I would start losing weight. Again, it's not out of vanity. This is like if I'm extremely obese, then it's like, hey, like you're going to die. So we need to do something extreme. This is a dangerous surgery. Something like 1% of gastric bypasses fail and end in death. And so, but it's like the odds that you die in the next 5 years is really, really good. The odds of you dying from this surgery is 1%. So what do you want to do? And you're like, I'll go 1%. Will my insurance cover it? Well, where do you fall on this chart? So based on where you're at, they may or may not pay for your surgery. If I say I want a brand new knee, I'm going to have to prove that my knee is really, really bad before they're going to replace my knee, right? So insurance companies use BMI charts. So there's currently controversy about revising the BMI chart because insurance companies are like, you can't have that surgery. Why? Well, you're obese. No, I'm not. I'm an NFL running back. Well, your BMI is high. I'll run through that wall over there if you want, but like, I'm very fit. I can do 20 pull-ups kind of thing if I'm an NFL running back. So BMI. The next thing, again, this is not for body shaming. This is for like health reasons. When you're the president, then your spouse has like a cause that he or she adopts. So when I was growing up, it was Reagan. So Nancy Reagan's thing was don't do drugs. Cocaine was a huge problem at that time. And so kind of her cause was don't do drugs. Barbara Bush, hers was like reading to kids, kind of like childhood literacy, that type of thing. Michelle Obama's was childhood obesity. And so The reason for that is this is something that I can see in my lifetime. This is something that if you ask anybody my age, I'm 45. So if you ask your parents, hey, have you noticed that like America has like had more trouble with keeping body fat off in your lifetime? They'd be like, absolutely. I don't need to see the data. I've seen it in my lifetime. So to give you an idea of what it's like, in 1990, they went and this is the percentage of adults that are obese, not overweight. Overweight is like, yeah, you could stand to lose some. It would be healthier for you to lose some. Your joints would probably feel a little bit better, but like, it's probably not going to kill you very early. But if you're 30 and you're overweight, we're afraid that by the time you're like 40, you're going to be obese. So this is obese, not overweight, but obese. To put this in perspective, a person that was at healthy weight, like let's say you're 5'11 and you're like 155, for you to become obese, you'd have to weigh 215. So what would be considered a healthy weight, you've got to add on 50, 60 pounds. I've looked at mine. For me to be obese, I have to add on 55 pounds onto my body to barely crack into the obese category. So in 1990, the ones that are white, we didn't have data on. The ones that are light blue, those states, less than 10% of the adults were obese. The kind of medium blue, 10 to 14%. So basically, there were like 10 states that had less than 10%, and then everybody else had 10 to 14%. Okay, 8 years later, this is when I was a freshman in high school or at the end of 8th grade. Depends on whether this was fall or spring, right? By the time I graduated college, everybody's color changed without exception. So some went to dark blue. Some skipped dark blue and went straight to tan. Dark blue is 15 to 19%. Tan is 20 to 24% obese. So back here, that medium blue is 10 to 14. If I double it, it's now 20 to 24. And that's dark blue. I'm sorry, that's tan. 2006, there's only 2 dark blue ones left. In 1990, dark blue didn't exist. Now there's only 2 dark blue ones left. It looks like Colorado and maybe Massachusetts. We now have orange and red. Red is greater than 30%. So if it's 30 to 100%, we just say red. If it's orange, it's 25 to 29. But that's 2006. You can see where the trend is growing and where it's going. There's 2009. Now we have red. The next one is 2015. 2015, we had to come up with new colors. So in 2015, they said, hey, you know how back in the day we split all of these? What we're going to do is we're going to take all of these colors and just combine them into one, less than 20%. And that is the lightest green. Oh, and by the way, nobody has it. So that green is 20 to 25%. Yellow is 25 to 30, orange is 30 to 35, and red is greater than 35%. And this is 2015. So, and they'll say estimates should not be compared to estimates before 2011. That's because we changed the chart colors. It's not that we became more harsh. It's like, hey, we had to like revamp it. We're running out of colors. Not really running out of colors, but you get the idea. So here's my point. In 1990, if you were dark blue, you'd have been ranked 50th out of 50, right? Nobody up there is dark blue. You'd have been last place out of all 50 states. In 2006, if you're dark blue, you're tied for first. Isn't that crazy? The Olympians that were running in 1990, those that were in last place today would have been tied for first. Out of how many people running? 50. Like when you start having swings that big, that's kind of crazy. So That's why Michelle Obama's thing was childhood obesity. So let's relate that to actual biology. So we got this mouse, and this is not an agouti mouse. Remember those agouti mice? They'd have orange fur. Because of that, we knew that they were going to be obese. This one's obese for different reasons. Normal mouse next to this guy. That is his body fat that's on the ground. Those are his legs. The body fat has overtaken his legs and it's on the ground. He weighs more than double two normal mice. Here's from the side. You'll notice those feet aren't even necessarily holding them up. They're just like kind of splayed out. So they're looking at these mice and they're trying to figure out like, hey, is there some sort of metabolic cause for their weight gain? And if so, maybe that could be tied in with humans too. Some people have a much tougher time losing weight than others. Some people have a tougher time keeping weight on. And so they're always trying to gain weight. It might be muscle. Um, Other people, they're always trying to shed weight because it's hard for them to keep body fat off. So we are metabolically different. So maybe we can figure out what's making this guy obese. And if we can figure out what's causing it in him, maybe we could figure out like, is something causing this in America? Like, is it willpower or is there something in our food that's causing this? Like, you look at the trends and we're getting a lot bigger. Is it just that we're lazy and we don't care? Or is there really, maybe there is something in the plastic and water bottles, or maybe it is Cheetos, or who knows? So maybe we can figure it out in mice and then translate that to humans. Okay, so here's what they figured out. Lights are coming on. Hunger is complicated. So part of it's physiological, like do you physically need food? And so your body, your brain says, feel hungry. But then there's also psychology to it. I might not actually be hungry, but if I don't feel good, my body's reward system is set up to reward me if I have access to sex, food, water. So if I'm thirsty and I get a drink of water, my brain's like, feel good. So if I don't feel good and I eat something often high in carbs, I get kind of a dopamine hit and I feel good. I might not even be that hungry. It just, if I eat a Snickers, I feel better, like mentally feel better, even though I'm not actually hungry. So how does this work? Well, one of the ways that it works is this. Hang on, I haven't used my art palette in a while. I've been watching some Bob Ross. I don't know what he's on, because it comes on our general things. I don't know if it's Hulu or Netflix or Amazon, but apparently he has like 40 something seasons. So I started with season 1, episode 1. It's awesome. It doesn't even look like him. The microphones are horrible. You can still hear him like on the canvas, but it's different. He's like explaining stuff like, here's what we're going to do with this technique. And you're like, man, it's crazy. So here's a brain. We'll say this is the hypothalamus of my brain. So hypothalamus of my brain. And down here, I'm out of cad yellow, alizarin crimson. These are fat cells. And so these fat cells are deflated. And so what my brain does is my brain sends out a signal. My hypothalamus controls a lot of like base instinct stuff. Again, like thirst, hunger, things like that. And so my hypothalamus might be saying, I'm hungry. I'm hungry. Like that. Okay. One of the ways that we can set that or shut that off is I have a receptor for this chemical called leptin. And whenever I eat extra calories, let's say that I need, for me to teach, let's say I need 2,000 calories Actually, I teach really hard. So let's say I need 2,500 calories to teach all day. And so 2,500 calories, but I eat, so I need 2,500, but let's say that I eat 2,700. All right, by the end of the day, I'll burn 2,500. I've got 200 left over. So my body will generally convert whatever it is, whether it's carbohydrates, protein, whatever, it'll convert it into fat. And it'll convert most of it into fat. And so I start filling up these fat cells with droplets of oil, with fat. So whenever I start filling them up, well, this is like the non-erasable kind. There we go. So as I start to fill them up, we make some happy little plump fat cells. They're full of fat. When they do, as they fill up, they release this chemical called leptin. What do I know about leptin just based off of the name? Yep, it's a protein. How did you know that it was a protein, Jonathan? Yep. If something ends in ion or en, it's probably a protein. If it ends in ace, it's probably a protein that's an enzyme. So I secrete leptin. Leptin hits this receptor, and then that basically turns off this message that says, I'm hungry. Well, if I have one fat cell send out leptin, there's not very many people screaming to say, I'm not hungry. But if I fill in another one and another and another, then every time I fill up a fat cell, I send out more leptin. And so those are more messages saying, no, I'm not hungry anymore. So as my fat cells fill up, it should tell my brain, and my brain says, okay, forget that hunger thing. You feel full now. Okay, so back to these mice. These mice are overweight, but there's two different mutations that we've noticed that they can have. So one mutation is called OB. It's short for obesity. So if your OB gene is mutated and you're a mouse, you get big like the guy on the right. The other one is DB. That doesn't mean that this is a mean person. It means diabetes. So we notice that this one is mutated in diabetes sometimes. So now, here's our question. They're trying to figure out which is which. So it could be that leptin is messed up. I might have a mutation for making leptin. If I make leptin incorrectly, the wrong shape, it won't fit the receptor, so I'll never turn off this signal, so I'll always feel hungry. So maybe one of these codes for leptin. Or it could be the receptor. It could be leptin receptor. I might make perfectly good leptin, but my receptor is broken. So it turns out one of these codes for leptin, and one of them codes for leptin receptor. We wanted to figure out which one is which. So here's what they did. They took some mice and they made them what they call parabiotic mice. That means they made them conjoined twins. They're not twins, but they made them conjoined. They sewed them together. And they didn't just sew them together, they like intertwined their cardiovascular system. So it'd be like you go up to me, you cut open my side, and you go up to my buddy, you cut open his side. You take some of my main arteries, cut them, some of his main arteries, cut them, sew them together. So now, like if I'm drinking Coca-Cola, his blood sugar goes up also. So we're sharing the same blood supply. Parabiotic mice. And so here's what they look like. Obviously, this is a drawing, but here's what they look like in real life when you make a parabiotic mouse. Mice, a parabiotic pair. I don't know how you say it. There's another one. You can see I have one with dark hair and fur and one with lighter fur. They kind of sewed them together. Hopefully they're friendly. That'd suck if like that one dude you really hate and you wake up the next day and you're like, son of a, are you kidding me? Like, I couldn't have got that guy. Had to get this guy. This shows what it looks like before they put the skin graft back on as they sew them all together. So now, that's what they did right here. So this guy is an OB mutant. He has a messed up OB gene. We don't know if that gene codes for leptin the chemical or leptin the receptor. This guy right here that's labeled DB, he has a messed up DB gene. We don't know if that codes for leptin or leptin receptor. So now, my question is this. Based off of these experiments and what happens as time goes on, take a minute or so, figure out which one codes for leptin and which one codes for leptin receptor. I've got two possible mutations. OB could be mutated or DB could be mutated. So if they're labeled, that's what's mutated. So a red OB means his OB gene is messed up. A blue DB means his DB gene is messed up. So based off of the parabiotic experiments, we're trying to figure out what's what. So give it just a second, and then we'll see what you got. And actually, since this one's pretty simple to answer, it might be hard to get the right answer, but like we can vote on it. So basically, I'll say like, hey, raise your hand if you think OB is the receptor, or raise your hand if you think OB is the chemical leptin. We'll do something like that. So take just a moment. It's funny, I've been teaching leptin stuff for quite a while now, and it actually popped up on the AP Bio test. Like one of their experiment questions was like, there's this chemical called leptin and all that. And I was like, holy crap, we've learned that. This is your illustration, and that's one of the ones that we've learned. Okay, so take maybe 30 more seconds, and then we're gonna call it to a vote. And you guys can vote in the chat. One of those codes for leptin the chemical, and one codes for leptin the receptor. All right, so OB. OB is either the receptor or leptin the chemical. So raise your hand if you think that OB codes for the receptor. Okay, raise your hand if you think OB codes for the chemical. Okay, it's a landslide. Chat has 0 participation. Okay, great. So it turns out that OB is the actual chemical. Why is it that this experiment gives me a lot of evidence that, hey, OB probably codes for the chemical leptin instead of the receptor leptin?
Because the other mouse is leptin would be produced, then the receptor would be able to read it.
Yeah, the other mouse is producing leptin. That's why he's normal weight. So once we fuse their bloodstreams together, this guy must have normal receptors. That's why he now responds to that mouse's leptin, and so he no longer has this insatiable appetite. Over here, DB, he has totally normal receptors. So, I'm sorry, he has messed up receptors, but he's really big. So doesn't he have tons of fat cells that are full? And aren't they all releasing tons of leptin? So when we attach them together, even though he's releasing tons of leptin, his receptors don't feel the effects of it. Then this mouse goes anorexic. A good chunk of the time, this mouse completely quits eating and dies while it's still attached to this guy. And you're like, why? This guy is releasing so much leptin because he's so big, this guy no longer has any appetite at all. So this guy actually shrinks. Then same kind of thing over here when we combine them. This guy has bad receptors, so it doesn't really matter how much leptin there is. Why is this experiment important? Well, because humans release leptin. They're like, what's it look like? It's the same thing. They're interchangeable. Humans also have leptin receptors. So let's say that I have 10 patients. Let's say that you run a clinic or something, and you've got 10 patients, and they're all severely overweight. Do what?
You sew them
The first thing you do is you sew them together. Yeah, exactly. Um, would you be open to being sewn to that man over there? Sure. So what we could do is we could figure out like, okay, I've got 10 people that are morbidly obese, morbidly meaning like it's going to kill them. They're morbidly obese. And what good is it going to do if I inject them with leptin? Well, it depends. Do they have mutated leptin or do they have mutated leptin receptors? If they have mutated leptin, then it's going to be possibly a pain in the butt, but the solution is simple like we can inject you with leptin, kind of like type 1 diabetes. I'm not saying the lifestyle is easy, but the solution is simple like, oh, you don't have insulin? Inject yourself with insulin. Done. Again, it's complicated, but like as long as we can inject you with insulin, we can control your blood sugar. If my receptors are messed up though, injecting you with leptin is going to do zero, it's going to have zero impact. So for a little while, these studies came out and they're like, oh my gosh, we finally found the weight loss pill that you can lose weight without working out and dieting and stuff like that. You'll just not feel hungry. Then, of course, like many things, new study dims hopes for a quick fat cure. Hormone that slimmed fat mice disappoints as a panacea in people. So it didn't quite work as well as we thought it was going to in people. It seemed like it was going to be sort of a magic bullet, but apparently it's not. So it's actually more complicated than just that. You start getting insulin receptors involved and you get all these other proteins involved. So here's leptin and leptin receptor, but all this other crap is coming into play as well. So it's not quite as simple as just this diagram up here. Okay, so here's what we've learned. Everything that you've always been told is generally true about health. Like, should you probably eat more vegetables? Yeah. Should you probably eat less junk? Yeah. As Americans, we probably don't eat enough vegetables, and in its place, we eat too much meat. I'm not saying meat is bad. I'm saying that on my plate should be mostly plants with like a little bit of meat instead of meat, and then fine, I'll eat some vegetables too. Your plate should probably be like 3/4 plants. Okay. The next thing, exercise. Should probably do that. So there's not really very many quick fixes. There are diets that sometimes allow you to lose body fat, like your waist might get smaller, but it could still be bad on your arteries. So any diet that is very high in fat, it might help you lose weight. And so if you do that for a few months to lose 20 pounds and then you go back to like a more healthy diet, that's fine. But if you're just always like eating bacon and like cream and stuff like that and cheese, that's you might be skinny on the outside, but your arteries could be just full of sludge. So it is possible to eat a high fat diet and still lose weight, but your arteries might be in bad shape. So all the stuff that you know you're supposed to eat, that's what you're supposed to eat. When people talk about eating processed food versus whole foods, generally, if the food that you have when you buy it, you have to eat it within 5 or 6 days, it's probably fairly raw, like strawberries and bananas. After about a week, you don't throw them in the freezer, they're going to be gross. If I've got something like a fruit roll up that I can leave in a bag on a shelf for a month and a half and then it's okay, I don't really know about the fruit in there. It might be fruit flavored stuff, you know? There are exceptions. I can have canned vegetables. So the next thing that I wanted to show you was this. So we got this lady, and obviously it's going to be kind of a trick question, but how old do you think she is? So here in a second, I'll let you vote. I'll give you like a range of ages. Let me change that. Not how old do you think she is? How old does she appear to be? You might say like, well, she looks like she's this, but I bet she's actually this. So we'll look at a couple of different pictures. By comparison, your parents are likely in their 40s, I'm guessing most of them. I'm 45. So this is 45. It's trying to imitate. This one, the wrinkling's exaggerated because it looks like she kind of has her chin pulled back a little bit. So that might be an unfair picture. But again, I'm 45. If your ninth grade teacher was Miss Cecilia, she just turned like 30 this year, I think. Uh, Shelly Hawkins, the chemistry teacher, she's like a year younger than me. Those are about the only people whose ages I know. If you had Arkfeld, um, back when he was here, he's 10 years younger than I am. So he would be 35 now. Okay, so with that in mind, um, do you think that we'll start, do you think she's between 0 and 10? 10 and 20, 20 and 30. Again, based off of appearance. We'll do an appearance one first, and then it'll be like, hey, what do you guess her real age is? Because obviously, if you're like, she looks 50, and I'm like, she's 50, you're like, all right. How many of y'all think she's in her 20s? How about 30s? Starting to have some stuff in chat. How old she appears. Okay, we got some votes coming in for mid 30s to early 40s. I'm seeing 40, seeing 38. Again, I'm 45. I'm 45. So far, everybody's guessing her younger than me. All right, so 40s. Maybe I just need to face reality. 50s. All right, so in person likes 50s the most.
I was gonna say 40s. I wanted to make you feel better.
Oh, thank you. All right, so you're gonna say 40s. How old are your all's parents? Are they like 45-ish to 50? Okay, so you have a pretty good handle on what like 45, 50, and stuff like that looks like. All right, she's 13. So she's an eighth grader. She has lipodystrophy. Lipo, meaning lipids, or lipodystrophy, if you're kind of a northerner. And so lipodystrophy, her body doesn't distribute fat properly. And so that's why she kind of has these wrinkles. The wrinkles aren't actually a skin only problem, it's the lack of fat underneath your skin. Have you ever seen somebody and they lost like a significant amount of weight and then afterwards they now look like older in the face? They kind of look gaunt. When you're younger, you have more body fat in your face. As you get older, one of the reasons your face changes is because like the body fat goes away and your face kind of leans out a little bit. So there are people that'll look a certain age, they drop like 40 pounds, and all of a sudden you're like, man, I mean, that's healthy, and I mean, your waist size went down and everything else, but like in the face, you look like 8 or 9 years older, you know? So that's kind of what's happening with her. So, quick little video clip. Make sure my volume is still where I want it to be. And you guys online did all settle in right around late 30s to like 40, it looks like. Okay, so I'll pause it every once in a while to kind of fill you guys in at home, because even if you're in person, they have kind of the narrator and the girl and stuff have kind of a thick accent, so it's a little bit hard to understand.
Laura Hartshorn has in many ways been robbed of her childhood. Her mum had to take her out of school because the bullying got so bad, and she knows when she walks down the street, people will stare at her, and many will shout abuse.
So took her out of school because of bullying. People apparently point at her and shout stuff at her when she's walking down the street. I know, they are mean.
Zara is 13 years old, but she suffers a rare genetic condition. She has the face of a grown woman, gaunt and wrinkled. Inside, she's a frightened little girl.
Feels like people are looking down their noses at me and staring. Everywhere I go, you know when you get that feeling that you're being watched.
So she said, everybody's always staring at me and looking down their noses at me. I'm wondering if this is a little bit in her own head, though, because like unless you know that she's 13, I'd just be like, I wouldn't stare at her. You know what I mean? If somebody's like, hey, she's 13, I'd be like, whoa, no, that's unexpected. But otherwise, I'd be like, yeah, there's like a 50-year-old lady. If I'm at like Walmart, I'm like, look at that. And you're like, what the heck? That's a 50-year-old lady. So, Now, maybe she's in a small town and everybody actually knows that it's like that girl's an eighth grader, and you're like, no way, she looks like she could have, high school age kids, something like that. So I'm not sure of how how true that is.
I feel that everywhere I go.
Recently, when she got on the bus to go to school and asked for a child's fare, the bus driver laughed in her face. Do you still try and explain to a guy like that? Is it?
Get the comfort bus in, especially if it's full of people. It's a bit too embarrassing, isn't it?
So she got on the bus and she asked for like the under 18 ticket price, and the bus driver laughed at her. And the bus driver's defense, I don't know if you've ever been behind an old lady at like the grocery store and she's buying some wine and they're like, I'm gonna need to see your ID, ma'am. And the old lady's like, oh, you sweet little boy. There's all this whole like old lady got carded kind of thing. Have you ever witnessed something like that? Maybe you haven't. Okay. Um, so sometimes people do that as like witty banter. So the bus driver probably wasn't trying to be mean. The bus driver's just like, you're not 13. Ha ha, that's a good one. Now that's $10. So it might not have been trying to be mean. But imagine you're 13 and people mistake you for somebody that's 50. That'd be devastating.
Zara's mother, Tracy, feels her pain. She too was born with lipodystrophy. How did you feel when you knew that Zara had this?
Grieving for a child that has got to go through the same things in life as me.
How did you feel when you found out your daughter had this disease? Well, I was grieving for her because I knew that she was going to have to go through some of the same struggles in life that I did. That makes sense?
And the age she's got to go through, and angry at myself for actually having Zara to some extent.
And angry at myself for having Zara to some extent. Sitting to her right is her daughter Zara. So as you said, the English are mean. Now, I don't think the mom meant it that way. I think the mom was sort of like, I have this daughter, I'm excited about it, but now she's going to have kind of like a life of sort of torture. And so I feel bad for like even putting that on her. So I don't think the mom really meant like, I wish I never had my daughter. But gosh.
Lipodystrophy is a genetic disease. It is hereditary.
Fatty tissue doesn't grow right or work right. Normal fatty tissues shrink, making people look sort of old and wrinkled and abnormal.
What do you think when you look at your face in the mirror?
I don't like it. Sometimes I'll sit at the mirror and start pulling the skin back and stuff like that. Most teenagers worry about spots and that, but what are you worried about? I'm worrying about surgery and stuff like that. And
So they asked her, so what do you think when you look in the mirror? And she's like, I don't like it. I sometimes pull my face back to see what it would look like without the wrinkles. Most teenagers are worried about acne and things like that. And I'm worried about like trying to get surgeries and whatnot. So it's another reminder that, and your generation is much better about this than my generation, is if somebody's different and you might be in a star testing room. And so there's some kid, and just like very early on, you're like, that kid's behavior is very different, like pretty unique. Instead of making fun of that kid might have some sort of major psychological issue. Um, Instead of her being like, oh my gosh, or something like that, just be like, man, she's still a human. That'd be tough growing up with something like that, especially when you're at the age, like she's probably wanting to start like dating people and stuff like that. So you're already self-conscious enough at that age. So I can't imagine when everybody thinks you're 50 and you're like, well, no, I'm like in high school and something like that. So it does kind of remind us to be kind to one another. And your generation is way, way better about that than my generation was. My generation looked for anybody with a difference and then just abused them. It was mean. Your generation is much, much more embracing about the kid you're sitting in class. And it's, again, like I said, it's very clear that that kid has major issues, and the class will like support the kid and everything, even like mean kids, even kids that are like buttholes, they'll be like nice to that kid, and you're like, thank you, you're a total butthole, but thank you for not being a butthole to that girl, because I know stuff that you guys don't know, and like just thank you for cutting her some slack, that type of thing. So anyway, leptin. All right. That was our new thing to kind of break the mold of looking at a bunch of free response. But now we're going to look at a free response. Well, again, so the positive takeaway from this is that in general, it will be tougher for some than others, but most of like trying to change some of the things with like obesity, a lot of it is under your control. So it might be way tougher for one individual versus another. It might be that your stomach has to get really full before you feel full. And somebody else, after a few bites, they start to feel full. So it's not an even playing field, but a chunk of it is under your control. Now, if you have some of these mutations, maybe not so much. But a chunk of it is under your control. And the thing that I always find fascinating about science is we are often always trying to help people. And we haven't found a complete solution yet. But, you know, I would say this, if you can get in the habit of exercising and keeping like a decent diet now, it's easier now than any other time in your life. Um, if you don't know how to lift weights and you have a friend that knows how and they can teach you, great. Or later on, get a trainer. But you know, you can't. Don't feel bad if you end up one day and you're like that super skinny dude in the gym. That's me. Or you're like a very overweight person. I used to be super self-conscious if I was going to go to the gym, but then I realized like when I saw a really heavy person like on the treadmill, I didn't think, man, that guy doesn't take care of himself. I'd be like, man, you go, dude. You're fighting a good fight. That's gotta hurt. Like I hate running. I can't imagine running and having a bunch of extra weight also. So I respected that guy for being in the gym. So then when I went over and found the lightest set of weights I could to do an exercise, had to swallow my pride, but I was like, well, screw everybody else. Am I gonna get any bigger if I don't go to the gym? So yeah. One last thing, lights are coming on. Quick little extra. Let me flip over to this one. Then we'll look at that ecology question that I know you're chomping at the bit to get. Um, as a general rule, if you diet, that's how you become a smaller version of you. But lifting weights is how you change the shape, like the proportion of your bodies. So I think one thing that gets some people in trouble is a lot of people, we diet and exercise, mostly for vanity. We just look in the mirror and we're like, ah, I wish this was better. Fine, I'm gonna change the way I eat and exercise. Um, so I think what frustrates some people is like if you just jog on the treadmill, you might lose weight and you'll be a smaller version, but your proportions will likely stay about the same. So if what you really don't like is that as you get older, you get like a dad bod, you're kind of like, you just kind of have like a bunch of extra belly fat, and you don't like the fact that your body is like, I have smaller shoulders and a big belly, then if I go jogging all the time, my shoulders get smaller and my belly gets smaller, but my proportions are kind of the same. So the only way to get like bigger shoulders and a smaller belly is lifting weights. So got to lift weights if you want to change the overall shape of your body. One last bonus of lifting weights. If I jog, let's say I burn 250 calories jogging. And while I lift, in the same amount of time, I might only burn 150 calories lifting. When I say lifting, I just mean anything that's very strenuous on your muscles. So dips, I'm counting that as weightlifting, or pull-ups or something like that, as opposed to like completely cardiovascular stuff. If you're a distance runner and you're like training like hardcore, like cross country, you are going to get fit and you will have like very strong legs. I'm talking about the person that does like 30 minutes of really light jogging on a treadmill. They're probably not bulking up their legs. They're probably just burning calories while they jog. So while I jog, I'm burning calories. And once I quit, I'm pretty much done. When I lift weights, I might only burn 150 calories. But then for the next, some studies say up to 48 hours. For the next day, day and a half, 2 days, my body has to repair itself. So I might burn 200 calories fixing all the muscles that I got little micro tears in. So overall, while I was lifting, I burned fewer calories than my friend that was jogging, but 3 or 4 days later, I will have burnt more calories overall. And I will have invested those calories into repairing muscle, and so that's why my muscles will be bigger. So it's like a win-win. You're burning more calories, and then those calories are going into building muscle, so you're burning more fat, but then building more muscle. So it's like a double whammy. Kind of cool. Last bit of advice. If you're wanting to get bigger muscles, it's less about the, like, let's say I was doing bench press, it's less about the push up and pushing it out, and it's more about whenever your muscles are stretching that they get damaged. If you ever work out and then afterwards you feel sore, and eventually you start working out and you want the sore because that means that you felt like you got a good workout, it's the eccentric movement that provides the soreness. It's actually logical if you think about it. Here's a rubber band representing my muscles. If I have little bitty micro tears, that's what happens when I get sore, and that's what I repair that makes me bigger. So if I'm going purely, if I don't care about how much I can lift, I just want to like look different in the mirror, it's eccentric, going down slowly, which makes sense. My pecs are stretching as the weight gets on my chest. When am I damaging this rubber band? When it's stretched or when it's not? It's when I'm stretching it, right? If there were little bitty micro tears, like right now, if I stretch this out and leave this like this all summer, when I come back, it'll be ruined, right? It won't have its elasticity. So as you're stretching the muscle, that's when you get those little micro tears. That's what makes you sore. So let's say that you're striving for that. You work out 3 days a week. That might be what you want to do. Let's say that you're on some program and you have to work out every single day and you don't want to be sore. Then throw up the weight quicker and then kind of relax as it comes down. Don't like bring it down super slow and controlled. So if I bench and I lower it really, really slowly, and I do all my sets like that, tomorrow I'm going to feel it a lot in my chest. I'll be very sore. And I'll likely get bigger muscles. If I'm going for power and I'm like, all right, I don't want to be sore tomorrow because I have to do another workout. And if I focus most of my energy pushing up and not as much controlling it on the way down, I'm less sore. Okay, end of life lesson. So we got one free response to look at up here. Then we'll call it a day. 2014, number 4. So if you're on our Google Drive and you go into AP Bio, Notes, Unit 8, this is in that file called AP Bio Review Free Response. And it's almost the last one. It's page 34 out of 36. Or if you just Google AP Bio Free Response 2014, number 4, there might be 2 versions out there, but this is one of the versions. All right, let's give it a shot. Finish strong. After this one, we'll be done. So you guys will actually have a little bit of just free time at the end. So that's my motivation to buckle down and do one more free response before the weekend. All right, so adult male guppies, that's their genus and species, Pasilia reticulata, exhibit genetically determined spots, while juvenile and adult female guppies lack spots. In a study of selection, male and female guppies from genetically diverse populations were collected from different mountain streams and placed together in an isolated environment containing no predators. The study population was maintained for several generations in the isolated area before being separated into 2 groups. One group was moved to an artificial pond containing a fish predator, while a second group was moved to an artificial pond containing no predators. The 2 groups went through several generations in their new environments. At different times during the experiment, the mean number of spots per adult male guppies was determined as shown in the figure below. Vertical bars in the figure represent 2 standard errors of the mean. All right, so we got a bunch of fish. Adult males have genetically predetermined spots. Youngins and females don't have spots. We raise them all together. We get them from a bunch of different ponds, raise them all together. Then, after a while, we separate them. We put some into the predator pond and some in the no predator pond. All right, so down here it says time in months. At month 6, this is when they separated them. So the population was right here. And then we put some of them in a pond without a predator. And we put some of them in a pond with a predator. All right, now let's see what they want to ask us. A, describe the change in genetic variation in the population between 0 and 6 months and provide reasoning for your description based on the means and standard error of the mean. So take a moment, describe the change in genetic variation in the population between 0 and 6 months and provide reasoning for your description based on the means and standard error of the mean. Between 0 and 6 months, the change in genetic variation, and provide reasoning for it. All right, anybody want to volunteer to take a crack at it? Describe the change in genetic variation. Must not be the same, so it either became greater or lesser. What do you think? Did genetic diversity increase or decrease? They told us it changed, so it can't be the same. How much? Okay, maybe increased. So what's your logic for increasing from 0 to 6 months? Like, oh no, I was just trying to be nice and throw something out there, Mr. Cotton. Okay, cool. Say that again? Yeah, they were just like hanging out. They didn't have a predator or anything like that. So maybe it could increase genetic variation, but then they say provide reasoning based off of means and standard error of the mean. So it must be something in the graph, as opposed to just like, here's what I think might happen. It should be like, oh yeah, according to the graph, this is what happened. The mean number increases. Cool. What about genetic variation? So when I started out, I agree. The mean number of spots looks like it was heading up. Statistically, I realize these bars overlap, so they'd be like, well, statistically, it's not enough to matter. But I agree, that looks like it headed up. But as far as the change in genetic variation, at time 0, I'm at 10 plus or minus almost 2, almost up to the 12, almost as low as the 8. But then by the time I get to 6 months, here's the range. So there's a greater variety early on and less of a variety here. So it's actually the genetic diversity went down. How do I know that? Because the size of the error bars. This is my range versus this is my range. If I said, what's the diversity in heights? I said the average person has a height of 10. Some were as high as 12, some were as low as 8. Over here, the average height is 11.7. Some were as high as 12, some were as low as, 11 and a half. All right, part B. Propose one type of mating behavior that could have resulted in the observed change in the number of spots per adult male guppy between 6 and 20 months in the absence of a predator. So between 6 and 20 months in the absence of a predator, propose a type of mating behavior that could cause that. I'm sure they got some pretty funny answers on this one. Yep, selective mating. So What would cause that? What does it seem like they're selecting? I agree, selective mating, or they'll also call it like sexual selection. Yeah, apparently, it seems like the ones in the absence of a predator, the ladies like the spots. So those that had more spots were more likely to mate. Those that had fewer spots were less likely to mate. All right, part C. Propose an evolutionary mechanism that explains the change in the average number of spots from 6 to 20 months when there was the presence of a predator. So propose an evolutionary mechanism of what happens in the presence of a predator. What do you think there? Yeah, maybe they're harder to see, like cryptic coloration. So apparently, if you have spots, you're much more likely to survive. So the number of spots goes from almost 12 down to like 9.5, or maybe even a little bit less than 9.5. So apparently that helps them blend in or something like that, cryptic coloration. So my evolutionary mechanism would be like natural selection. And due to like cryptic coloration, maybe the spotted ones are just easier to find or something like that. Or maybe they look more delicious to the predator. Who knows? But either way, it seems like having spots means you're more likely to get eaten. Lacking spots means less likely to be eaten.